Back to another Married for a Purpose live.
Well, it's live now. You might be watching a recording and it's not live, but it was done live and recorded
Which
just
means,
for you.
That's it. That's it. Hey, today we're going to be talking about something that is near and dear to our heart. We've been paying close attention to, and that is getting into the groove.
Boy, you got to prove you're lucky.
No. Okay, yeah, no, not that. Getting into the groove of creating new habits.
Right.
New habits of thought, right?
Yeah, so we've talked to you all a little bit over the past few weeks about being intentional and intentionality. And if you remember, if you haven't caught those episodes, then go ahead and check those out. I think you'll find them encouraging, right?
Right.
Well, we've been talking about what to manage for and what to manage against. And as we were cruising through our week, the last couple of weeks, we felt like, there's still some things that we're recognizing in our life today about being intentional and about creating the right habits and really managing for those things that we say are most important and in fact are most important. And so as we talked about this week and really thought about how that applies to us, we thought we'd just share with you a little bit more and expand on those thoughts a little bit. You want me to kick off and talk about the...
Sure, yeah. I think a big part of it came around a dinner conversation that we had with friends.
Yep.
We were at dinner with some really good, close couple friends of ours, and they were talking about the 5 fives that John Maxwell always talks about.
The Daily Five.
The Daily Five,
Yep.
yeah. And it made us begin to do some introspection of what are our consistent habits that we have in our life.
Right. And so when we were talking through this, I was reminded of different ways and different seasons that my priorities of the new habits that I'm trying to create change or morph. And we'll draw all of this back to relationship and how it affects our marriage and how we can utilize this information for our marriage. But we thought a good example would be something that's very near and dear and very real to us in the past several years in our life. So a couple of and they had driven a fairly long distance to come and visit us here in South Florida. And by the time they arrived here, they were their bodies were less than 100%, let's say. And it made it very difficult for them to enjoy their vacation and their time with us after, investing all of that time to get here and all of that energy. They were just cashed and their bodies were sore. And that moment for Julie and I became a sort of a negative motivator, if you will. In other words, we had been, like many of you probably, talking about, we need to get in the gym, or I'm going to get in the gym, or I'm going to start taking better care of myself, right?
Yeah, I need to start eating better. I need to not eat as much pasta and French fries and pizza, and I better not go too far down that track.
But we made a lot of excuses, and we talked about, we're doing better than we used to, and things of that nature. So anyway, we were motivated in that moment, and I looked at Julie, and I remember it still. I looked at you, and I said, you know what, babe? You will never hear me say, I'm going to get in the gym or I'm going to the gym again unless I've got gym clothes on and I'm headed there. Good intentions are not enough. Andy Stanley, which we quote in the book, Two are Better Than One, says direction, not intention, determines our end destination. And that's absolutely true, but it's not just the intention. It is putting the intention, it's not just the direction. We have to set the intention and then begin to take the direction from that point.
So we were coaching a couple couples this week, and a verse that kept going through my mind was, the road to hell is filled with good intentions,
right?
And I thought, there are some areas of my life that I want to be intentional about, but maybe I'm not taking the steps of direction that I need to. So when we're in having this dinner conversation, it caused me to go back to a season of life where, for us, it took a lot more intentionality to be kind. It took a lot more intentionality to make sure that I was adding value to Greg's life, or more intentionality, discipline, if you will, to make sure that I was honoring my kids and making sure that I was really letting them know how much purpose they have as individuals and to communicate that love in a practical way. And so one of the things that began to guide my life that became at that time a laser focus, I had to be intentional about it. But I remember laying in bed, and before I put my feet to the floor, I would simply say, "Speak, Lord, your servant's listening," much like Samuel did. I'd stumbled across that verse. We did a women's Bible study, and it became something that I really was hungry for, to be able to hear what God wanted for my life.
Sure.
And so rather than just having that intention, I needed a step of direction to take to be able to get that end desire. And so what I determined was I would literally lay in bed until I heard from God. Like I would stay there and just say, "God, speak, I'm listening to you." So that was one of the first practices. And along with that, the second thing that became a part of my life, an intentionality, a step of direction, was to, as I started my day, was to ask, how can I intentionally add value to your life? How can I let you know how special you are? And for my kids, how can I add value to them? And that caused me to say yes to some things that maybe I didn't necessarily have time for or want to do, like cooking breakfast or packing a lunch. I might have been just as in big of a hurry as the kids were. But instead, that question caused me to say, how can I, right, add value? And so it began to help me determine my other next step best practices.
Yeah, it really did, and I have to tell you, I've been inspired by that. Just your servanthood. You know, one of the other things that you did for a pretty extended season is if the kids, the bus stop from our home is, I could chuck a rock out there. I mean, literally, if I really work at it, I think I could wing a rock all the way there. Don't you?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So, especially since now I'm back in shape. So.
Anyway.
But she would take the kids down to the bus stop. And it wasn't convenient, and it's early in the morning, and it's like, I don't want to rush out. We work from home, and so that's one of the conveniences that we don't have to rush around and get ready and all that good stuff. But you did that, and you still do it from time to time. And it's time when she's able to spend with the kids, and it means something to them. And so it's not every day, but many times you do. So it's just a matter of again, setting the intention and then creating a habit of looking for opportunities to show that the people in your life that mean the most to you have value, and how can you serve them. So, you went a little bit different direction there than what I anticipated you to do this early in the call. But let me come back to the gym as an example. And the reason that we're doing that is because we're hoping that you can pick up the different parallels in your life and use it not only in your marriage, but also in other areas of your life as we have as well. Because it really is a lifestyle, right, of being intentional and managing for the things that really lead us to the outcomes that we're looking for. So another inspiring thing that happened, lest it be just a negative motivator, it was some other friends of ours, actually Scott and Catherine, very good friends. They happened to be two of the people that were at that dinner the other night as well. And they had began to... Is it began or begun?
It doesn't matter.
Well, I just wondered.
They started.
Yeah. So they started working out and taking care of themselves. And here's where we caught the inspiration. They had been at it for 3 to 6 months or so. I think about the 6-month frame is when they really began to see great results. And we were able to see the results in their lives as well of their dedication and the things that they'd committed themselves to. And so the culmination between family coming in and, struggling because their health was not great, combined with seeing another couple who inspired us in a positive way because they saw great results, inspired us to begin to get on the train, right? And I mention this because we need to have positive influences in our lives. Who, for instance, to use Julie's example and our ultimate goal here to inspire you in your relationship, what's a relationship that you aspire to? You as a couple, not just one of you, but maybe, both of you, hopefully, that you aspire to be more like. Who do you admire because of their marriage and the quality of their relationship with their family and their kids and such? So we were inspired by Scott and Catherine, and we began to go into the gym. And when it was difficult, because at first, let's face it, when we're creating new habits,
It's not easy.
they're not habits.
Right.
It requires so much intentionality and discipline, right? It was just such a grind to say no to a big bowl of cereal at 10 o'clock at night, because I love a good cold bowl of cereal. I used to anyway, right? Before I went
Maybe
to
he
bed.
still does, but
But I avoid it, and it's easier now.
right.
And but it's now it's easier because it's become a habit. It was such a grind to discipline myself to go to the gym and work out, or to get on the elliptical machine for 30 minutes. At first I think we started out, we were doing like 10 or 15 minutes. Boy,
About
we
nearly
felt like
dying.
champions.
Yeah.
Our tongue was dragging the floor. But today, and it's been about 3 years since we've embraced this lifestyle.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's come in layers. So I encourage you to be where you're at, but be intentional to grow beyond where you're at. In other words, there's things that we do now that we knew to do then, but boy, we just weren't there yet. We had to grow into that. So we started with 15 minutes on the elliptical machine, and now I work out almost an hour and a half, hard, aggressively, when I go to the gym. And saying no to pizza is not even really saying no. I don't focus on it anymore. It's not nearly as much of a temptation.
So I think the important thing of the takeaway is to set the intention. What is it that you want to experience in your relationship? We've given a couple illustrations of, or in a spiritual growth, right? The same holds true for our relationships. It's at one season of my life, it took a lot more discipline, of intentionality, of setting the intention, of having the desired vision and outcome. I wanted an intimate relationship with God, and I wanted an intimate relationship with Greg, and I wanted an intimate relationship with my kids, to be able to really add value and to live a life of significance. And so at one point, that took more of, I'm going to stay in bed until, right? For you, it was, I'm going to go to the gym and until. And it was the set intention, though. We had the desired vision, the desired result, and we used that as an inspiration. We also had, as you talked about, kind of the negative. And the negative was we didn't want our bodies to be hurting. We didn't want it to be where we had to push ourselves up off of a couch.
And we were feeling that way at the
I
time,
was
too.
especially feeling that way. I had a lot of joint issues. And so there was a negative. And the same was in our relationship. There was a season where we spoke a lot of unkindness to one another. We fought every single day. And when we determined that we were going to demonstrate unconditional love to one another, there were things that we managed for, there were things we managed against, and we set that intention. I think one of the things that's important is, as we're setting the intention, is that we have practical next step application. So if we were to ask you, what is it that you desire for your relationship? What do you desire for your parenting? What do you desire for your finances as a couple? And you begin to get that vision. Get the vision for it, understand the negative inspiration, understand and see a positive inspiration that you're moving towards, set the intention, and then ask yourself, what could possibly sabotage me from that desired result?
So before you move on with that, because I love what you're saying there. So there's a couple of different motivators, okay? One, really, so it starts out as a motivator, and that's the negative, okay? It's a lot of time, right? It's a lot of time. I don't want to end up here, okay? But the truth is, and this is really key, so don't miss this, please. Write this one down. The negative motivator will never be enough. It is at bare minimum almost always not enough. Can I say it that way? Almost always not enough.
Almost always.
Yeah. Because there has to be something that we're moving towards. Right? Remember, what you feed grows, what you starve dies. So there has to be something specifically that we're feeding. So in this case, what we're wanting to starve is we're wanting to starve the idea, in other words, of what we don't want, right? Because we also gravitate towards what we contemplate. So with those things being true, we want to make sure that we're gravitating and that we're contemplating the right things, which means we need an inspirational vision. Because here's the thing. Once we get that, and we found this both in lifestyle of working out, in parenting, in our relationship, in business, in finances. I mean, it crosses all boundaries, right? It's ambidextrous, I guess, maybe might be a word that we could use if we wanted to use a fancy word.
Fancy word. Ambidextrous.
Ambidextrous. Anywho, and when we get a vision, so in this case, part of our inspired vision was Scott and Catherine for the gym, right? It's like, okay, so on the days when it was really, really difficult and it was like, I'm not seeing the results that I want, I was reminded by their example and inspiration, a positive inspiration, that you know what? If you stick to it and take little chips at it day by day, it pays off and you get the result that you're actually looking for, right? And so find an inspired vision. Again, that's why we mentioned in the relationship, hey, what about, another couple as an example? But identify specifically what it is that you want to move toward so that you can begin to feed thoughts and give your energy and your ideas and your concentration and your focus to those things, because that's what will help you move towards them.
So a truth to consider for today is that it does take intention to develop new habits. What's awesome, though, is as you have that intention, as you put steps of direction towards that intention and that desired result, then it becomes a new habit. And the new habit is celebration. The new habit is healthy lifestyle of living, right? The new habit welcomes working out and saying no to French fries and pizza and pasta and all those fun things, right? And occasionally it's okay to have some of that because you have a different habit in place.
That's right.
And you have maneuverability and room, a little bit of wiggle room. So as you're putting those disciplines create new habits that then all of a sudden you're living. And for me now, I don't have to intentionally wake up and say, okay, God, what is it that you're speaking? Now it's a get to of life.
It really is a habit.
It's a habit, and it's a enjoyment of a spiritual discipline. And the gym is much the same for us. I don't have to go to the gym. It's like, man, I can't wait to get into the gym. And that actually happens more often than not. And so the same thing holds true in our relationships. I remember, Greg, a time when, and this actually came out in one of our coaching calls as we was working with a couple, of an intentional period that you put in place that now is just a product of who you are. You want to share that idea?
I love when she puts me on the spot.
You know what I'm talking about,
I just
though.
love when she puts me on. I do know what you're talking about. Yeah, so years ago, and I know this is going to be hard for you all to believe, but I was a terrible husband. Isn't that so hard to believe?
I was a terrible wife.
That's not true. We both had some room to grow.
Opportunities.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
No, really, I was, and I'm sure you don't find that hard to believe. But I was really bad, and I remember through different time periods there were different things that I had to be really intentional to manage for. And so one example, I'll use just one of the examples, okay? One example is I literally used to have my paper planner, and I was a busy dude, so I would randomly, each week, on some day, I would just write in, tell Julie you love her. And I would sprinkle that all throughout my planner on different days throughout the year, throughout the month, at least once every single week. And that was intentional, okay? Now, I want you to understand that it wasn't that I wasn't telling Julie that I love her every day, because I was. I tend to do that. I learned early on the importance of communicating love, right? We never know when it's going to be our last day.
Right.
So, what the intention was really was to remind me at least once a week, for crying out loud, to stop and really put some thought to how I can communicate love to the person that I vowed before God and man to love and cherish till death do us part. And not just to communicate I love you or say I love you or communicate love on my terms, but to really think about, how does Julie hear love? How does Julie feel loved? When does Julie feel the most loved by me? And when I remember asking myself those questions, I would come up with a whole lot more quality answers and a way to communicate that love to you in a way that made you really feel loved. Now, today, it's a habit, or at least I would like to think it is. But can we get very real with them?
I think it'd be great to tell them
Yeah.
the new intention that
Yep.
we are centering in
This
on.
is what caused us to have this conversation with you all this week. It really is what we're about to tell you. It was kind of, I guess maybe the dinner table with our friends was part of it. But this was another thing that actually came up before
Yep.
the dinner table conversation. What we realized is that even though we've had good intentions and we have had good habits, there were some habits that we needed to refresh and we needed to become really intentional about.
Yep.
And I just have to say, I'll pass it to you because Julie let out on this. Kudos to her. But as soon as she did, I reciprocated and it got my mind thinking. So I just love this. I'd love to share what you were inspired with recently as it applies to our relationship and communicating love. And
So, like every couple, there are different ebbs and flows of relationships. And what I realized is we had gotten really busy. And over the last 6 months, quite honestly, last year, we've been raking things off our plate to make sure that we're managing for what's most important.
Each other.
First of all, God, and then each other. And so what I began to realize is one of the things we became intentional about is guarding for date night. So every Wednesday night, it's our date night. Don't ask us to do anything because we're going to be already busy.
yep. Which we told you about that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. But what I realized is there was something missing, and it kind of started in a negative thought of my mind. And the negative thought was, Greg just doesn't really surprise me anymore. I miss being surprised. And I didn't stay there long because I don't want to feed a negative thought. There's no fruit in it. And instead it's like, you know what? I bet if I'm feeling that way, Greg might be feeling that way too. And I started thinking, when's the last time I surprised him with anything?
That's so mature. Honest to goodness, that is healthy.
Well, you make it easy, but
No, it's, not necessarily, but I'm just saying that really, I'm sure the folks that are watching, we have a dog.
he
We
likes
told
to
you
show
that
up.
a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago too. but-
Casey.
Casey, I need you to be quiet.
Come here, Casey. Come on.
Come
Come on. Here.
Meet
Come on.
Casey.
Come on,
dude.
Casey.
Yeah. This is Casey, so Casey's going to join our conversation after he hushes.
All right, hush.
Anyway, back to the regular
back to it.
scheduled program.
So the whole thing is that I realized, hey, if I'm feeling that way,
Dude.
see, he hasn't learned the habit of hushing. So all of that to say, I started feeling that way. I thought, if I'm feeling that way, Greg might be feeling that way. And so I decided to surprise him. And I kept listening for different things that I thought might make our date night special, something that would be for him. And so planned that out. And then after that, I started to communicate with him. I said, I kind of miss the element of surprise. So I wanted to surprise you because I realized I haven't surprised you.
Well, here's what we realized. When she before she brought it up verbally, what happened is she initiated and planned one of our date nights a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool, like I didn't have to make the decisions or do the planning. She did it, and it was a surprise, and it was really nice, and we had a great evening, and connected, and and then a week or so later, we had a conversation. She brought it up. She said, I kind of missed the element of surprise, and we got into dialogue about this, and I told her, I said, wow. That is such a great insight. And as we talked about it, what we realized is that over the course of the last several years, due to circumstances and, finances and busyness and, just all the different demands and challenges in life, right? We hadn't even gotten each other gifts. We were intentional about that. There was a season where we were intentional. We're not going to do that. We're going to do this instead. And so that was planned, but that season's come and gone. And so what we decided to do is to re-engage in the element of surprise to one another. I want to surprise her with a gift. I want to surprise her with a date night, or surprise her by doing something way out of the ordinary as an act of service to her, or whatever the case may be.
Surprise with little notes. We used to always put Post-it notes in bathroom drawers or suitcases if one of us was traveling.
Underwear drawers.
All the time, just notes everywhere.
Because you get underwear every day.
So you know that they're going to find the note. But in a place that they visit often, right? And so it's the intention now that honestly is going to take a little bit more of intent to develop new habits again of surprising one another. So in your marriage, what do you need to implement? What steps of direction can you take? How can you set the intention for the desired outcome that you want for your relationship?
Yeah, and like we mentioned earlier, stop and put some quality thought into it, first of all. To figure out what you don't want. That one seems to come to most of us pretty quickly.
Yep.
But, a little bit more challenging thought we've found is really identifying what it is that we do want, like Julie talked about earlier. And then once we identify that, then it's beginning to create an atmosphere. In other words, set yourself up for success. Make your goals realistic. Make your ideas and what you're implementing something that you can embrace and do now. And then find inspiration. We found inspiration. One of our inspirations, like we mentioned, was Scott and Catherine. And then, since then, it's not just been, it just didn't stop there. So don't just stop wherever you start. Continue to grow and be intentional about that as well. Now it's a Navy SEAL and a neurosurgeon who happens to be, big into health and things of that nature, who's inspired us as well. So we've continued to grow.
Yeah.
And then as you set yourself up for success by finding that inspiration of where you want to move towards and kind of controlling your environment, there was a time when there were certain people that we cut out of our lives. This is way early on in our relationship, but so that we could make sure that we had the right environment. And then it's before you know it, what happens is what once took discipline, when you learn and see what it is and create a vision for what you want, then the discipline becomes inspired discipline,
right?
Which is the only way you can sustain discipline, by the way. And then over time, it becomes a habit. And now what once took so much concerted effort and energy and concentrated intentionality is so much a part of who we are that it doesn't take nearly as much effort and intentionality, which allows us to tackle something new in our life.
So one of the things that we have in the book, Two Are Better Than One, God Has a Purpose for Your Marriage, is that our thoughts become our habits. And it's really closely tied to another quote.
Actions and our actions.
And our habits become our actions. Our actions become our character. Our character becomes who we are. And who we are determines how we do everything. And so we want to be a part of your journey. We'd love to encourage you as you set new intentions to develop new habits that'll make your marriage stronger, to live purpose-focused, not problem-focused. One way that we do that is we have a 7-day reading challenge that's absolutely free to help you discover God's purpose. So we'd love for you to go to marriedforapurpose.com. You can scroll through that website. You'll see the 7-day reading challenge there. Sign up for it. You'll get 7 days of reading absolutely free. Again, that's one way to take a step of action to determine God's purpose for you as a couple, as a married couple. And the other thing that we'd love as well is for you to put maybe some of the things that you want to develop new habits to. So if you're watching this on Facebook Live, make sure in the comment section that you're listing out some things that we can stand with you in prayer about. List those out. We'll pray with you. If we have any insights or tips, we'll comment below that.
Yeah, and if you've got some insights or some
Yeah.
tips or some best practices that have helped you in in your marriage or otherwise, by all means, feel free to share them because we're still learning too.
Yeah. Thanks.
And we like to learn.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. No. That's.
Is that good?
Are you ready to tell them bye? Is that what you were getting ready to do?
Bye.
Hey, until next week, we hope you're blessed, and we look forward to your comments and any questions that you might have.
Thanks for joining us. Welcome back to another Married for a Purpose Live.
Well, it's live now. You might be watching a recording and it's not live, but it was done live and recorded.
Which
just
means-
for you.
That's it. Hey, today we're going to be talking about something that is near and dear to our heart. We've been paying close attention to, and that is getting into the groove.
Boy.